Hey guys, it's John from 3D Printing World, and if you follow me on Twitter, then you probably already know that I'm coming out with a new printer at MRRF this year. It's a IDEX printer called the Muldex. It's going to have some interesting features I think you guys are going to like a kinematically coupled bed and belted Z-axis. One thing I wanted to do was I wanted a direct extruder, but I wanted it to be light. So Zesty just came out with their new extruder, the Nimble version 2, and I thought it was the perfect opportunity to put it on my printer in time for MRRF. So in this video, I thought I would give some initial impressions on it, as well as show you guys how to assemble it. If you're not familiar with the Nimble, it's a remote direct drive extruder. And that means that the hob gear is still mounted on the hot end, similar to a direct drive extruder, but the motor is attached to the frame like a Bowden type extruder. And how this works is that they use a flexible drive shaft. At one end is connected to your stepper motor, and the other end is connected to your to the worm gear, which drives your hob gear. The reason why they use a worm gear is to reduce the backlash, because basically the flex shaft is just a tightly wound spring. Without further ado, let's start the assembly. I just also wanted to say that you can find the assembly instructions on Zesty's website as well. You're going to start off the assembly with the hob gear and the worm drive, and in my case they came pre-assembled. I started by marking the indicator on the shaft with a Sharpie so that I could tell when it was spinning. Next I placed the 5mm bearings on each side of the shaft. The hob side goes on pretty easy as it's a slip fit, but the drive side requires a little force since it's more of a press fit. Next you'll need one of the 9.5mm bearings and the bottom housing and a little bit of force to press it all the way in. I used this socket so that I could get the bearing to seat all the way into the housing. Once you have the bearing set, then take the worm drive and apply a little bit of the lube they give to you. 1 drop should be enough. And then insert that into the bottom housing. Just take care that you put it in the right orientation. Now place 1 drop of lubricant on the worm gear as well. And place that into the bearing that you placed into the bottom housing. Now you're ready to put the other 9.5mm bearing into the top housing, just like you did into the bottom housing. Now you can finally assemble the top and bottom housings together. It's a snap fit. To assemble the breech, you'll need the 3mm bearing and pin. Basically, you just put the bearing into the hole and then press in the shaft. I actually had a hard time getting the shaft to press all the way in, so I ended up using some C-clamps to get it to go in all the way. Now you can assemble the breech onto your Nimble, and you're all set. So Zesty is recommending a 20mm pancake motor from Steppersonline for the Nimble, but I think I'm going to use LDO's slim power stepper because it has a hollow rotor, which I think will help with the inertia. Use the supplied M3 screws to attach your stepper to the mounting frame. In my case, the screws were a little bit too long, so I had to make them shorter. And then you'll have to come up with your own fasteners to attach the bracket to your frame or to your printer. In my case, I'm using M5s and T-nuts to attach it to the frame with additional spacer shown. Next, the stepper is all ready to mount to your printer. Next, let's attach the coupling to the motor. There are 6 set screws in total, 4 on one end, 2 on the other end. You want the end with 2 on the side of your stepper. When you tighten the set screws, you want a 1.5 millimeter gap between the coupling and your motor. Next, we can put the collet on the end of the flex cable. You want the collet with a little detent in it. You're just going to push the flex cable all the way into the collet and use the supplied M3 screws and nuts to tighten it up. Once you have it tightened up all the way, both of the ears should be touching each other. Next, we can install the flex drive into the coupling. You're going to push this all the way in until it stops, and then tighten all 4 screws on the flat of the shaft. Once all the set screws are tight, you can push the collet into the bracket and then turn it until the little divot locks into the hole. Okay, now let's move to the extruder side of the flex cable. What you want to do is take one of the collars they give you and put it around a PTFE tube. I would suggest using a Capricorn tube. Push that tube all the way in until it dead ends on your hot end, and then cut the PTFE tube off at the end of the collar, and this will give the correct length going into the extruder. I would also suggest pulling it out and using an X-Acto knife or a chamfering tool and break the inside edge a little bit to allow the filament a smoother path to get to the hot end. Next, we'll put the Bowden tube back in the hot end and then take the collar, put it in the nimble, and then press the nimble down onto the carriage and then hold it down with one of the supplied M3 screws. Next, we're going to take the other end of the flex drive and the last collet and push it onto the flex drive until it dead ends, and then install the remaining M3 screw and nut. Once the collar is tight, it can be attached to the nimble with a twist. I would then suggest loosening up a bit to get out any twists of the cable and then tighten it up again. You can then install and tighten the last 2 long M3 screws. When that's done, you're ready to open the breech and load the filament. I hope this video might help answer some questions you might have when assembling your nimble. And if you want more on the Muldex, make sure you follow me on Twitter and subscribe to my channel. I should have some new videos coming your way shortly.